welcome to the post-Week 7 college football playoff projections. I am Jet Hatch, as always, and let's get right into it. So, number 1, I have Texas. After their 31-point win against Oklahoma on Saturday, Texas looks like the best team in the SEC. Right now, they're the only undefeated team left in the conference. And it might have been a slow start, but Quinn Ewers coming off of an injury, missed the last 2 games, hasn't started in 4 weeks before Saturday. I kind of expected a slow start by Quinn Ewers, so that wasn't too shocking, especially since in the second half they picked it up a little bit. So yeah, I wasn't too shocked there, but number 2 is Oregon. That's where the conversation started, especially around the whole purposely sending a 12th man on to stop the play because Lanning thought that Ohio State could have scored on it was basically a loophole. Using a penalty against themselves for their benefit was kind of a weird thing to hear about, but I mean, it worked out for them and they ended up winning the game. Dylan Gabriel right now basically played himself into the Heisman conversation Saturday. I think the tough thing with Dylan Gabriel is he doesn't have the strength on the throws that are across the field, but he definitely has the touch downfield, if that makes sense. So against Michigan State, he had 2 interceptions, and they were both in the red zone, where he just couldn't zip the ball into a tight window. And basically the Michigan State corners got to the ball before that. So what Lanning did is he took more shots downfield because Dylan Gabriel could drop the ball into a bucket if he wanted to. And less short distance, because short distance across the field, it's hard for Gabriel to get a ball to like a flat or a slant because he just doesn't have the zip on his ball. So I think it's kind of interesting to see. He fits perfectly in a lot of offenses nowadays where it's go for it on 4th down, take shots, basically just risk it on offense to try to win the game. It'll be interesting to see, because most of the, like when I go talk about Boise later, it'll be stacking the box, cover 0, man on the outside. Whereas Dylan Gabriel, you might want more of a cover 3, cover 4, and try to have him find the open space 5 to 10 yards down the field. So he has to throw it in those windows. Because right now, I mean, Ohio State did more of a cover 1, cover 2, man type of defense that they would switch from. And what that would do is, outside of the numbers on the perimeter, they would just go downfield and Dylan Gabriel would get the ball to whoever he wanted to, usually Tez Johnson. Speaking of receivers, though, it would have been a lot more helpful for Oregon if Trayshawn Holden didn't spit in the face of an Ohio State corner. That would have been nice to have him, and I think that's something to look forward to when they do play Ohio State potentially in the Big Ten title game, or basically any of their top matchups. Is in this one they found a way to win without one of their top receivers. So yeah, I think maybe just have Dylan Gabriel hit the weights a little more, upper body, try to get that shoulder a little stronger so he can power a ball into any throw he really wants. Number 3, I'm back to Miami. I watching Clemson struggle a little bit in the first half against Wake Forest. I mean, I've always kind of had the question for any of the ACC teams, but especially Clemson, is who have they like? They played Georgia. They don't look good. They get blown out against Georgia. And then their toughest opponent has been NC State, Stanford. Like, I don't really know. So You could say the same about Miami. I mean, Miami almost lost to Cal and Virginia Tech, and South Florida's 2-4. They were supposed to be one of the top group of 5 schools, so that win doesn't look as good for Miami. I don't know. The ACC to me is, I think, overrated. Having 2 teams in the top 10 isn't that accurate. So I mean, it's tough to, like, I think Texas A&M should be higher. Texas A&M will be in this version of the projections, but you can't really say the ACC deserves an at-large spot right now. Number 4, I have BYU. The Big 12 teams are just doing what they need to do. They're not making a statement. I think that's what's hard is, so I feel like if this continues, the only thing that's going to separate BYU and Iowa State or any of the other Big 12 teams is a loss from one of the undefeated teams in the conference. So, I mean, there's not much to say really about BYU. They won by 22 against Arizona, but it was kind of, Arizona had a couple injuries and BYU just extended the lead late. It was really 27-19 type of game the whole way, and then they just had 2 late touchdowns that made it look worse than it really was. Iowa State was kind of the same way. They were struggling on offense against West Virginia. They're 5th in defense in points per game, holding their opponents to an average of 11 points. So the defense has never been the issue. It's always the offense. They were down for most of the game until the 4th quarter. They had 2 late touchdowns, just like BYU, to win 28-16 in Morgantown, but it wasn't convincing. So I'll have BYU until they lose. A lot of people have Iowa State. That offense doesn't look so good, and I mean, as we saw in the second half of the BYU game against Arizona, is their defense could still hold. I mean, Fafita and McMillan are one of the best duos in college football, and that BYU defense could still hold them to only 19 points and then still put up 40. They're more balanced than Iowa State, so I have BYU at 4 right now. This is where it kind of gets interesting. At 5, I have Ohio State. It was a 1-point loss to the second best team in the country. I mean, it was pretty even, I would say. I would give an edge to Oregon. I think Oregon's the slightly better team, but Ohio State's 3. I think Ohio State's better than Penn State and Georgia so far. They still have Jeremiah Smith. They still have Emeka Ibuka. Will Howard's a big question mark, especially the last play. I mean, there's 6 seconds left. Quarterback draw was not the play that was called. I don't know why he thought he could get some yardage and get down in time to call a timeout with any time left. Like, if anything, he probably should have just dumped it out and then had 2 or 3 seconds left for a Hail Mary. I mean, that's better than running the clock out. Will Howard make some questionable decisions at quarterback, which was his issue at Kansas State. So I would like to see a little bit more development on the mental aspect, the IQ of him. I would like to see Chip Kelly and Ryan Day really work with his the mental side of his game. Number 6, I have Penn State. Drew Allaire looks really good. That offense is looking much better, more potent than it was in the past couple years. So shout out to Kotelnicki for doing that as the OC for Penn State. They haven't really played anybody. I mean, you could say USC's 3-3 now. USC's better than 3-3, and that's a result of the Big Ten being a super conference. But they're lucky they left LA with a win on Saturday. I mean, everything went their way. that needed to go their way. I mean, all the 50-50 was really more 80-20 toward Penn State this weekend. And I would give it to their offense. So it was 30-23. They needed 1 2-minute drive, and they executed it perfectly to send the game to overtime. It was a good showing for Penn State, but man, if they're struggling against USC, what are they going to look like against Ohio State and Oregon? You know what I mean? So even though their offense looks better, they still might have the same they right now have the same question of, can they still do it in big games? We don't know yet, but I mean, I think that question just is highlighted more after the game Saturday in LA. Number 7, I have Georgia, and this is where I kind of can connect it with Clemson. I don't have Clemson in my projections at all, because Georgia hasn't looked like a complete team except for against Clemson. The only reason I have them ahead of Alabama is because Alabama's loss is to Vanderbilt. I mean, nothing against Diego Pavia and what the Commodores are doing, but it's not. Georgia's loss was 1 possession to Alabama in Bryant-Denny, prime time. Alabama's was a 12:30 kickoff, Pacific time, so 3:30 on the East Coast. But, I mean, it was a midday game. It was kind of a lull. I would just like to see Georgia play complete on both sides of the ball. Carson Beck isn't the quarterback that we thought he would be this season, and they haven't really established that much of a run game. I would like to see a balanced offense and a more dominant defense like we've seen Georgia in the past. Number 8, I have Alabama. Milroe and Williams are still looking like one of the most potent duos, quarterback-receiver duos in the country. I would just like to see more. I would like to see Kobe Prentice step up. I would like to see some of the other wide receiver options step up. We've seen some glimpses of Justice Haynes in the backfield for Alabama, but I would like to see a more consistent run game where you can balance it so Ryan Williams isn't double and sometimes even triple teamed against. Number 9, I have LSU. That was probably the craziest game on Saturday. And I mean, the saying is, nothing ever good happens in Death Valley. The opponent comes to die in Death Valley. I've questioned that saying the last couple of years. Well, Ole Miss and the Rebels did go to die in Death Valley on Saturday night, and it was kind of nice to see, especially after the week 1 loss where the win against USC basically slipped out of their hands. It was good to see them come back and win in overtime against Ole Miss, top 15 opponent in the SEC. I think my question is, I would like to see LSU take a lead against a top opponent and then keep it and not lose it away like Brian Kelly said. And he was very vocal in that post-game press conference against USC that his team needs to adjust and be able to take a lead better and be able to finish a game off in the last 15 minutes. And so I would like to see that coming up against some of their top opponents that they have, Texas A&M, Alabama. But with that being said, they have, I think, the 3rd strongest strength of schedule. So if they go 9-3, they probably have more leeway than other teams, where I think LSU might be a 9-3 playoff team at the end of the season that will shock people to get over some 2-loss teams. But I mean, they look like it right now with Colin Lacey and Garrett Nussmeier, have a great connection. Caden Durham looks like one of the best, if not the best running back in the SEC. And, I mean, we kind of knew that coming out of Duncanville. His 4x4 track team set a high school record, and you could kind of see it on the field. He's quick, and he's small. He's shifty. I mean, it's hard to get him down at all. And he's just a freshman for LSU, so if they can keep him, they have him for 2 more years at least. Number 10, I have Indiana. This is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm working on my midseason Heisman watch for the Daily Evergreen right now. I have Curtis Rourke 5th on the Heisman watch. He has a 7-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio and the second best QBR that is just shy of 92. Of course, he's behind Blake Horvath, who's had the best QBR all season, it feels like. But Indiana has a pass-heavy offense that is working with the Cignetti-Rourke duo at coach and quarterback. Something clicked since week 1, and they've been carrying that momentum in Bloomington since. I mean, I feel like this Indiana team is kind of a land of misfit toys. You have Surratt transferring in from James Madison, coming with Cignetti. Cignetti alone has always kind of been one of those Kalen DeBoer type. He's always had success at the lower levels. He's had success at Elon. He's had success at James Madison. And now he's trying to kind of go up the ranking, and now we're seeing him have success at the Big Ten level. It'll be interesting because their first real challenge is Nebraska on Saturday. It is in Bloomington, so I think Indiana will be fine, and I think the bigger questions will be when they play Ohio State and when Michigan comes to town. Maybe some bigger guys on the defensive line, some better athletes. Nothing against Nebraska and their athletes, especially Dylan Raiola. But I mean, I look at that schedule and they're undefeated, and I don't see a loss really outside of Ohio State and potentially Nebraska on Saturday, now that Michigan's very questionable on offense. So it'll be interesting to see if Curtis Rourke can continue surprising people and go up the ladder of the Heisman watch, because right now Ashton Jean-T's 1. Travis Hunter might have kind of separated himself at 2, but 3 and on, it's pretty open. So it'd be interesting to see if Curtis Rourke can become a Heisman finalist and be in New York in December. Number 11, I have Texas A&M. Texas A&M is one of the most balanced offenses in all of college football, and that right now is showcasing really in the SEC standings. They're 3-0 in the SEC and first overall. I was shocked to see Connor Wegman. I thought Marcel Reed was the better choice at quarterback for the Aggies, but Connor Wegman looked phenomenal against Missouri in a 31-point win. They had a bye week this week, so we'll see him again on Saturday against Mississippi State in Starkville. But another team where outside of the last week of the season, they have Texas. LSU looks better, but if we're looking at a Texas A&M schedule where they're 9-3 with one of the best strength of schedules in the country, and their 3 losses are to all top 12, top 10 teams, I think they might get a playoff spot as a 9-3 team. And then number 12, I feel like it's getting more interesting by the week. Number 12, I have Boise still. Man, I mean, it's hard to say because they don't have an impressive win. Their best wins probably against Washington State. Outside of that, maybe Georgia Southern. They have UNLV coming up, so they can make a statement. They could separate themselves. a little more with Army and Navy, who are looking phenomenal. But there are some positives about Boise. Of course, Gene T, Heisman front runner, is going to be just setting any record in the Mountain West that he wants, and potentially going for some of the national records as well. My issue is still Hawaii. It was a 6-point game until the second half, fourth quarter. And Hawaii did a good job. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see teams stack the box, go man on the outside, and have Maddox Madsen do something on the perimeter. He hasn't proven that he can. I mean, in the highlights, you'll see Gene T break off for a 60-yard touchdown, and he might do that 2 or 3 times in a game, and really that's what's separating them. I mean, Maddox Madsen looked pedestrian, and so yeah, Gene T had 221 yards on the ground Saturday, but it was on 31 carries. In this Hawaii defense that wasn't seen as being good really just made the adjustment of putting 7 or 8 guys in the box and trying to make Madsen throw, and he just couldn't on the Hawaiian Islands on Saturday. So I question it, because Army and Navy, especially Army, isn't the same offense we've seen in the past forever really. They've always been a triple option team where that's all they do, and now they're throwing it 12 to 15 times a game. They're dropping back. They're more balanced. They're still run heavy. Army and Navy are still first and second in the country on the ground. And saying how impressive Gene T is, Boise is 5.8 rushing yards per game less than Navy. So Navy has 295 rushing yards per game. Boise is 289 rushing yards per game. Another thing where Boise does stand out that nobody talks about is they have 29 total sacks as a team. That is first in the country. I mean, I know they have All-American defensive end. Again, that gets no recognition. But it'll be interesting to see if Boise can throw the ball, because if they can't, UNLV could get them. Boise has a bye week this week, so it'll be next Friday. But Boise's next game is against UNLV. UNLV could get them, especially with that stout defense that the Runnin' Rebels have. I mean, Oregon State could get them down the line, but I don't want to see Boise just be given the group of 5 spot. I would like to see them emphatically take that over Army or Navy. So thank you for joining this week. It was a little longer, but I feel like I had more to say. And I hope you come back next week. So thank you.